Welcome to the web news. This week's episode, we usually don't title the episodes in the web news like and talked about it, but this episode is titled Shai Hulud. No other explanation needed. No, obviously I'm going to explain, but
A lot of
yeah, a
explanation
lot of
needed.
explanation needed. But essentially, in the last 2 weeks, there's been two massive worm attacks. That is the reference to Shai Hulud. If you don't know, that's a Dune reference. Shai Hulud is that big ass worm that comes out of the sand and eats everything. And that's why we're going to be talking about Shai Hulud in this episode, because the two massive worm attacks were massive on NPM packages, and the worm attacks caused a bunch of man-in-the-middle attacks. We'll get into it a little bit more when I share my screen and go through the actual NPM supply chain attack. But both were achieved by attackers gaining access through like a phishing link to the admin accounts of a very big package maintainers. Then essentially what would happen is once they got the access to those accounts, they were able to submit the right pull requests into those NPM packages that obfuscated some code that would run, that would try to steal your crypto. And because they had access to the NPM accounts, they were then able to publish them to NPM, obviously, as new versions, and allowed them to essentially infest a bunch of people's code bases and try to steal some crypto. Now, were they successful in actually stealing that crypto? Not really. Like, I think it's in the hundreds of dollars, unfortunately, even though the amount of packages that they infested, or the amount of usage of those packages, is in the millions, right? Like, these were massive, massive NPM packages. This could have had huge implications on security if they hadn't been just trying to steal your crypto. Like, if they were trying to do something more malicious, this would have been way, way worse. But what I want to talk about today is the potential consequences of something like this continuing to happen in the future, right? This is something that could easily happen again. There is really no block for this on the NPM side, because these are people just getting access to these people's accounts through someone being phished in an email that, as everyone knows, you've been probably through company training, you've been through everything training, that happens to every single company. Someone clicks a link, boom, all of a sudden they have access to all of your accounts. They steal your session tokens and stuff like that. So I want to talk a few things about this, like what are the implications, how to mitigate your own projects from this. And I say mitigate because it's would be really, really difficult to completely prevent, right? And and also just highlight maybe some of the potential consequences that could happen in the future. But that's it for the introduction. I'm probably going to share my screen a little bit, and then we're going to get into some questions, and then Matt, you can interject as we're going through. So give me 1 second while I share the right page on my screen. Let's see. This is the first attack, I believe. Matt, let me know if you see that.
I do indeed.
Okay, sweet. So the two attacks happened kind of a little bit apart. So I believe one attack was a couple weeks ago. So this is the main attack that I want to say. What you're seeing on the screen right now is the main attack. It attacked a maintainer of some very big NPM packages. One of the biggest I would say is Chalk. Chalk is a CLI, a way to like style your CLI commands, and we used it in our projects. I've used it for many, many years now, essentially, to be able to style a CLI. So that's a big one. Debug is another really, really big one that allowed you to add some more debugging logic to like a console log. Again, something that we actually used in one of our projects. So we were affected by this in a certain way, but not actually critically affected. So essentially, when I went to go check if we used any of these packages, yes, debug and Chalk, but we did not use these versions. So if you look at at the screen that I'm sharing right now, the versions of debug and Chalk were specifically 4.42 and Chalk was 5.61. So these were the versions that were actually had the malicious code in it. We did not ever upgrade to those versions. Neither did all of our shadow dependencies, or actually like buried nested dependencies, right? So we were okay, and that's something that we checked right away, but some people were not. That's the point of this attack. It's not like that it's just all of a sudden taking your existing code and like flipping it to being malicious. It's just one packet, one update in that code that becomes malicious. That's an important aspect to this attack.
Well, I think ultimately, like, one of the big issues here is that NPM, when you use it, feels like an obfuscated web. What I mean by that is that whenever I go to use it, I use it for some pretty simple stuff. I've like brought in Tailwind into a couple projects. I've like brought in like jQuery for like a really old project once and things, and like just little things like that is my point. I'm not using these huge packages. I'm not like in there all the time. I'm not using NPM on the daily. That's not a part of my daily job. However, whenever I do, it just starts downloading stuff. Like it'll be like, hey, I want to download this. And it's like, all right. And it's like download this. And it's mentioning dependencies and your terminal's going nuts and it's showing all kinds of things. And it like, it feels, because it's like seemingly kind of grabbing out in all directions, you know, obviously anybody, or at least for me, it looks like a web, and anybody inexperienced like myself is not going to understand the implications of those many dependencies. However, having been in IT, I do understand the implications of having a lot of dependencies. Even, I don't know if you'd call them necessarily nested dependencies, but a lot of dependencies that are, I guess, nested inside of devices. Like, for example, I've worked in networking, and I mean, we could have a VPN gateway that we bought from somebody that has some sort of like web portal potential. We toggle that on to allow people to connect to this thing and like maybe set up an account or whatever the service provides. And then there's a security incident in which the web portal has something wrong with it, which allows them to get onto the actual hardware to like mess with our network stuff, or maybe they're able to log in to our VPN and then try to like sniff around our network. And there's a bunch of different things as well. I mean, like I worked in the hardware department. I've worked in IT desktop, in which case we were like sourcing, like, let's say mice, keyboards, printers, and things like that. Well, there can be problems there too. I mean, we are dependent on, Dell. Just, I don't know, just random example. We're dependent on Dell for the mice. Well, if Dell has a problem with their mouse, now we have a problem with one of our dependencies. And those are very simple examples, right? Where it's like, hey, this web portal is broken, or hey, this mouse isn't working. We have to find a new source or contact Dell to deal with it. Well, think about what I just said about the web. Like, there's a web of dependencies. Like if for example, and I'm just making this up, you download Tailwind via NPM and it requires Chalk for some reason. Just, again, I'm just making this up on the fly. It requires Chalk. Maybe it requires Chalk version 1. You download another dependency for Font Awesome, and it requires Chalk version 2. Now, as far as I know, and I'm inexperienced, now you have Chalk 1 and Chalk 2 on your system. And I can only imagine this web of dependencies, let alone the fact that NPM packages do not need to be created by huge corporations that have like support contracts that say they're going to have long-term support and things. I mean, like, I could create an NPM package if I make like an easy way to, throw Tailwind or something like that in React or whatever, enter in 1,000,001 potential things here. I could make my own NPM package. I could get bored of doing that, and then I could stop maintaining it, and then that becomes an issue, and someone who used me as a dependency. And I'm only talking about a layer or two deep for the sake of an audio show, but you can go down the rabbit hole here. This is dependent on this, which is dependent on this. Oh, that Chalk is actually dependent on this other thing. Oh, this other version of Chalk isn't dependent on this anymore. It's dependent on this. So now I got these two other, like, it's a dependency of a dependency, a shadow dependency, as Mike said, or a nested dependency, whatever. You can see how this is a nightmare. And so, like, to me, this is this feels like it is not a sustainable way to run things. And I'll just do a compare and contrast, and then I'll like hand it back to Mike. Let's think about WordPress for a moment. WordPress has a bunch of, you could call them dependencies, because people are installing plugins like crazy. So you kind of like make up your own WordPress stack, where you install WordPress vanilla, just out of the box. You install your list of plugins. So I'm calling that my WordPress stack, right? I'm installing my Elementor, my ACF, my whatever I decide to do, my different themes, whatever. I install all this stuff. I put it all together. And now my WordPress site is dependent on all these things. By the way, WordPress obviously is reliably updated, right? WordPress has been around for a long time. Elementor, big company, totally get it. ACF, big company. Pretty good like trust there, at least for me. But what if I need a plugin of a plugin? What if I need ACF to do something that it can't do right out of the box, and I download a very niche plugin made by like just some random dude. Now I have a dependency of a dependency. What is the chances of that dependency A being secure, B being supported moving forward, as well as the other ones? Over the years, WordPress has gotten a lot better. People have learned to install less plugins, be more minimalistic. Different plugins like ACF, for example, has added things like custom post types. So instead before you would need Elementor, CPT UI, and then ACF for an example stack, very common one. Now you can just have Elementor and ACF, and you don't need CPT UI necessarily in there anymore. So now, like, our stacks are getting better, and it's to the point where WordPress is old, but now WordPress is at a maturity level, at least like lately, where a lot of people online, I do not do this, but a lot of people online say enabling auto updates on your plugins is safe. Just like, I'm going to say 5, more like 10 though, probably between 5 and 10 years ago, whenever we updated a WordPress site, it would crash every single time. Every single time, or at least like 80-90% of the time, like very, very often. It would crash or have a weird issue, and you would never hear anyone ever say, yo, let's leave these auto updates on. And so my point is, WordPress learned to be more minimalistic, and like the people did, and then like, you know, the platform did. These platforms, these tools are getting more popular, they're making more money, so they're more stable. Or can we expect this from NPM? It feels like NPM is still in that Wild West period, like we had, you know, 10-ish years ago with WordPress. Is, you know what I mean? It kind of feels like that, doesn't it? Like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
The only pushback that I have for you on your side is, I don't think, from a stability perspective, maybe enabling auto updates in WordPress is fine, and that's what people are saying. From a security perspective, I would still say that it's very dangerous, for the exact same reason that we're seeing here. Because
Right.
a package can be super stable. There's nothing wrong with that. But if someone gets phished, like a package maintainer, even if it's a huge stable package maintainer, even worse, gets phished, they can interject code, push an update, have anyone that's enabled updates to, you know, get those updates to be automatically installed, and that's it, right? Like, it's not like every single one of those updates is being monitored and checked for each and every package that's on WordPress. That's not the case. Like, it can't be. There might be some automated checks that are done, but they obfuscate this code. Like, this specific attack was super obfuscated because it had to go through open source pull request merge, right? Like, so people actually like reviewed this code and couldn't find this issue because it was like just a random string of letters and numbers essentially, but it looked not super out of place. So it's the same thing that can happen inside of a WordPress package, where, again, guy gets phished, and their package gets manipulated to steal something, steal information, sessions, whatever, and that's it. So I would say that if you value security for your customers, it still wouldn't make sense to make auto updates. I think it's just the update procedure will be quick and maintained, maybe delay the update procedure sometimes. And that's actually one of the mitigations that I want to talk about right now, is that if you want to mitigate this specific attack, what they're trying to do is get anyone that updates their dependencies as quickly as possible, because they know they're going to get caught, most likely. They attacked a really big like a really big NPM package. There's a lot of maintainers there. Someone found it. Someone alerted the owner of the package. They found some fishy behavior and they removed it. I believe it was only live for 2 hours, right? I think that this specific version of the package was live for 2 hours across the board. So that's not a lot of time for people to go in and update their packages and then deploy it and all that. And that's why the actual like amount stolen was so low, because again, they're trying to almost like front run the situation. So the way to mitigate that is literally not allowing you to install a package, not allowing your packages to update until the release age is a day, a week, a month old. And you can do that with a new pnpm feature. You can do that manually, obviously, as well, which is, it just would be a lot of work. The new pnpm feature that released in pnpm 10, I believe, 10 point something, allows you to set a minimum release age globally so that any package will not be updated unless I think you manually update, would not be updated in like a pnpm install or an npm install unless it's reached a minimum age in the store, in the npm store.
Yeah, like the door closes,
Yeah.
quickly. If someone like breaks in, it's like the door is going to be closed on them swiftly once they're discovered. They're going to be removed and then door closed. Totally understand that. I think more so my point is that because things are more of like a web, and because things are more like we have too many dependencies, and therefore every single dependency is a potential opening. It's like with those WordPress plugins. It's like having 10 plugins, if there's a 10% chance of a plugin having an issue that will cause the white screen of death on WordPress, and you have 10 plugins, then chances are, probability speaking, one of those plugins on every update run, if you update all in one day or whatever, will then crash the site, right? But if you have 5, maybe you'll only have a crash once every 2 update runs, for example, just speaking in probabilities, right? The issue here is that this is like a web and it's all over the place. So it's not as easy as just being like, hey, is there a problem with this version or whatever? Like NPM still feels very like it's just in the terminal, very like, let's go quick, let's go fast, let's go whatever. But it's like there's a reason why, like your phone, for example. You download an app from a phone. Like NPM's kind of like an app store, but like, obviously different. It's for developers. It's kind of like an app store. It's like if I download the new Destiny game and then all of a sudden that Destiny game gets infected, I go to my phone, I find the Destiny icon, and I delete Destiny. Like it's over. But it's not that simple with NPM, right? You have to go through files and folders, and you're checking dependencies and all these things. Like, correct me if I'm wrong there, because I am a novice here, but like it isn't as easy as that. Obviously, the whole Destiny thing is a consumerized experience. But the thing is like, how many people we're like this show is listened to by a lot of beginners. If I start learning NPM for more and more, I'm still a beginner myself. And I don't know how to solve all these problems. Like, you know what I mean? And so I'm not saying that there's never going to be problems. That's not my problem. I'm not demanding perfection. I'm not even pointing the blame at anybody. My thing is, like, from my IT background, is you want to try to mitigate those issues, and every step you add can potentially have a problem. And like I don't want there to be a web of like potential when you could just have potential, just 3 instead of 10 or 5 or 47, right? That's the issue. And I feel like WordPress has learned to do that, whether that's the apps or the plugins getting better, whether that's WordPress getting better. It's a combination of things, certainly, right? People like having more simple websites for SEO and things. A lot of things going on. But it just feels like to me that NPM, and like, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, it has that Wild West effect still. It feels like it's just sort of like, all right, let's install this, and then it just installs like 40 things. And it's like, what? And I've done that with packages, only to find out that I could have just like downloaded a couple files and dumped them in my repo. They're non-security, whatever, conscious, so I can sync those to Git, and just they're tiny, and it's just like, all right, cool, and I can just have that. You know what I mean? Like it's like if and I'm just making this one up. It's like Font Awesome is very easy to install, but the NPM package for Font Awesome, in my hypothetical, I have not done this, but in my hypothetical, could be laced with a bunch of nonsense because it's a general use app, right? So I'm not doing the most minimalistic thing for my project. I could just do a custom install. Now, obviously, that comes with its own problems. If you have to update it and things like that, I understand that. But I guess my point is like, we need to be a little less Wild West and a little more minimalistic, I think, when it comes to dependencies.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you pretty adamantly. I think we've gone too far on the side of convenience, where we just assume that npm is secure, and we just assume that every package has the best your best interests. But the reality is that unless you go in and check manually what those packages dependencies are that you're installing, there's no clear way of it showing you. Now, there's a couple of different ways you can find that. One of those is a package lock file that will include not only all of your packages, but all the dependencies across all your packages. So for example, when I'm doing a test on, hey, do we have this installed anywhere, like that specific version that I was referring to, the first thing I looked at was the package lock file to see if it's mentioned anywhere there, and it will have the versioning in there. So it's not hard to find the exact versions of whatever's installed, including the sub dependencies and the nested dependencies. It's all in one single file that's easily greppable.
That's good. At
Yeah,
least that's good.
that is an advantage, but again, it's not like consumerized in the way that you just have like a very easy list to look through. It is a very like long file, long text file with a lot of numbers and names in there, designed almost for being like, control F or grep or whatever, just for you to be able to track all that, and for your app to be able, like your package managers to be able to manage what's installed, what's not installed, and stuff like that. So it's not a consumerized thing, but it is there. So I would, again, one of the things to mitigate this is to go in and check those files, check the package.json, package lock. Also, you can do a check across your entire file system to see if you can find those version numbers anywhere, the package and version numbers. That's what I did as well, just to make sure that my older projects weren't auto updating for whatever reason. That's all fine. That's like a way to immediately mitigate the situation. And overall, what I think we need to do as a web development web development across the board is to limit dependencies, is to go in and make sure that the dependencies that we're installing don't have X amount of sub dependencies, nested dependencies, right? Like, we need to be more cognizant of what we're installing. We need to see like, hey, we're installing this. Why are we installing it? Can we build it ourselves? No. Okay, we can't build it ourselves. Cool. What does this entail? Like, what does this package entail? Is it a package with no dependencies? Cool. Maybe it's installable. Maybe it's one of those 3 or 4 or 5 that are attack vectors, but it's a lower attack vector. Is this a package with 50 dependencies? Okay, how badly do we need this feature? Those are the kind of conversations you need to start having. And one thing that helps with those conversations is, again, like, something to talk about is, if it's a small package or a small feature that has a bunch of dependencies, maybe you can just rebuild that yourself or help with AI. AI is really good at common usage patterns. It's really good because it knows all those packages. You could build that. You could pull in the code from those packages manually into your application, fork the package, put it manually in there. That's another safer way to do it. Like Matt said, like, literally take the files, put them in. If it's something that you don't care about being updated, it's not a big deal. Just keep an eye on it. There's plenty of ways to mitigate it. It's just all of them involve work. And I think as web developers, we're so used to convenience. Like, all of our build tools, like the Vit build tool, like all of our dev tools, they're all about like just hitting pnpm install and pnpm dev and having everything work for you in the background as magic. It's become dangerous because a lot of people will just use it and not understand what it's doing at all in the background, like not even like a shallow understanding. And therefore, these things, even if they're like talked about in the news and talked about everywhere, they won't even like link it that they could be involved. Like, they won't even understand that, hey, like, this is a yeah, they didn't install chalk in their packages, but they don't understand that the package that they're installing have 1,000 sub dependencies, and one of those could be chalk. So they don't even look. And that's where you can get really, really toasted, if you're someone that just doesn't like it, are not always on top of it. So there's really no actual full on way to stop this, but like Matt said, mitigating the attack vectors is really important. One other thing I'll mention before, like, letting Matt kind of talk if he has any ideas, but my other way of stopping it is to not allow your regular dependencies to be auto updated. So a lot of people, if you look at your package.json file, this is different from the package.lock, package-lock file. The package.json file is where you would actually see the main dependency that you have installed. It won't show you the sub dependencies. It'll only show you the main dependencies. But in those files, a lot of times people will have version number and then like a little caret up right at the end. What that is saying is that next time you do a pnpm install, if you don't have any versions, it's going to install the next subversion of whatever the caret is after. So if you have the caret after 8.1.0, it'll install the next subversion of like 8.1 dot whatever the latest version of that 8.1 version is. If you have the caret after 8.1, it'll install the next, next subversion of that. So removing all those carets and manually looking at what to install is a good way to stop this specific attack, right? That will stop that. The problem is that even if you do that, when you go to install the next version, the sub dependencies won't respect that. So the sub dependencies will all of a sudden start updating themselves as well. So it just involves a lot of work. Like I said, it involves a lot of work going down. And I think the problem is that we don't like to do work. So this will remain a problem for the foreseeable future. And hopefully people listening to this will pay a little bit more attention to it and we can mitigate it a little bit. But there's other attacks that could happen as well.
Well, I don't even know if it's that we don't like to do work. It's like we rely on NPM to do that job as a tool, and then we like the work for a developer largely lies in them actually coding the website or the web app, that's on their plate. They don't want to be messing around with NPM a bunch. Now, obviously, like it's going to happen, like we mentioned. Obviously, sometimes you need to maintain your tool. It's just like a contractor might have to maintain like a drill. I totally understand that. But you don't say that a contractor's job is to maintain a drill. You say a contractor's job is to build something or to fix something or renovate something, right? It's not they're not the tool maker. They're not the tool fixer, the repair person, right? That's somebody else. And so I feel like there's a little bit of that in there. And also, we encourage, I mean, you and I do this too. We encourage people not to get bogged down in things like NPM. Like how many times have I said, I want to understand all this? And it's like, hey, like having a deep understanding of everything you're doing is bogging you down, slowing you down. And it's like basically halting your learning in place. Just get going, just start building, just get going, just start building. Well, they might not even understand what NPM is. They just went in, NPM, this, that, the other thing. They installed something. They all right. And then now their learning is in the body of that page they're building, or like they're building a nav bar, or they're trying to build a login screen, or they're whatever the heck it is they're doing. They're building. That's where their learning is. They don't even think like, well, NPM, like what are you talking about, right? Every day I boot up Windows, I don't fix Windows. I'm not messing around, messing around with Windows settings and doing that. I don't mess around with VS Code settings every time I boot it up. Yes, I understand it happens. I'm not saying that, everything should be utopian and served to us on a silver platter, but especially for the newbies, they don't even know. And I mean, I'm one of them, right? I go in there and start messing around with Svelte and SvelteKit, and I'm messing around, and I've exposed my own API keys on like little test things, so it hasn't been a big problem. But people who are brand new are gonna have no idea. They're gonna have no idea that this is an issue. Like, period. And so, like, this is where things start having it. Like, this is where things start having an issue. Like, many viruses on computers are relatively easy to remove. It's like, yeah, they're kind of scattered all over the place, but maybe there's 25 files across your computer. If you delete them, they're gone or whatever. Yes, I know there's more sophisticated attacks, but just roughly speaking, right? There's a reason why we have antiviruses, though. Like, I use an antivirus, like Windows Defender or whatever. Like, Mike uses an antivirus, I'm sure. There's a reason why, because like we could go through our files and make sure everything's all above board all the time, or you use that tool. And so there is an expectation from the tool. And in a utopian world, you would never have to work on the tool itself. But I don't know if I have any ideas on how to mitigate this other than like trying to, use less if you can. Like just that is like lessening the attack vectors, like you said. I do wonder whether we're going to see NPM grow and change into something that's more like a mature WordPress plugin landscape where there's a lesser chance of having issues. But like, I see you shake your head, but like, that's what we thought about WordPress 10 years ago.
Well, this is where I think, like, again, I disagree that there's a less chance on the WordPress side of things for this specific attack. The only thing that, yes, the attack vector goes down, but a major package has the same chances of being phished and manipulated as it does on NPM, right? Like it's the same attack vector that they would use in that sense. It would like, again, you're limiting the attack vectors by having less packages, sure, but it's the same thing. Like if it's a major package, it can happen. Everyone auto updates. Everyone's screwed on WordPress. It has happened on WordPress. I want to make that clear as well. Even in the recent history of WordPress, like it has happened. It does this specific attack. So I don't think that there's a much of a difference in between like If there's a package manager, it's most likely going to happen at this point. Like people will get phished, people will get their package with corrupt code. The way that we can prevent it, maybe, and this would be annoying, but maybe it's good, is having like a check for every update, right? Like if it's, especially if it's a major package used by X amount of users, like maybe it's like 10 million users, there's a threshold before an update gets released, having an external check that needs to be done. Now, whether that check will actually catch malicious code, totally arbitrary. Like it could not, but maybe adding it is a good idea. I don't know. Anyway, like there are some things that the NPM side could do. Adding a virus scan to the packages themselves, it might already do that. I'm not sure. There might be already solutions for that. But again, viruses are always evolving, and same with these exploits are always evolving. So someone will figure out a way around it. It's just an inevitability that people are going to get pwned by this kind of stuff. And even if you're super secure with everything, it's still an inevitability. Like you can be even more secure using only develop in dev containers. That's a really good one, actually. A dev container is an isolated environment that's outside of your regular operating system. That would make it so that anything you have in that dev container, even if you had an NPM package that was malicious, would only hit inside that dev container. So for in this example, if you're only doing crypto transactions outside of your dev container in your main computer or on a separate computer, then whatever's in that dev container won't have access to your crypto transactions, and therefore would have never been able to manipulate them or steal any money, right? So there's things that we as developers can do. There's things that NPM will probably try to implement, more two-factor authentications, more checks and balances for larger creators, for larger package maintainers, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, like, it's still going to happen. It's still something that we have to worry about. And yeah, it's something that every maintainer of a large database of packages will have to deal with at some point.
Yeah, and like I want to make clear too that like I'm not like attacking the people who were attacked. Like I haven't even mentioned that yet, you know, because I acknowledge as a person who again worked in IT that there's going to be attacks and it's going to get through. You know, like one day I might get hit too. Like it's not like these people are just being like super careless and like clicking every link and things like that. You know, social engineering attacks, phishing attacks, they're getting very complex, especially with AI, with like voices that you recognize on phones and things, like getting pretty serious. And there's a reason why like there's a lot of security stuff. Like not only is there security kind of in your brain where you can do social engineering training and things like that to like try to avoid it, but there's also like security on your phone. There's security, there's a security on your computer in various degrees, like maybe some encrypted hard drives. Mike mentioned dev containers. There's the antiviruses. Like there's security in everything, right? And because people are trying to like find every little thing that they can do to like try to attack you from everywhere, from Windows, from NPM, from whatever. And so I'm not even like talking ill to the people who got attacked. Like likely a sophisticated attack sucks. We constantly update security across the board in various ways. Sometimes something gets through and then you learn from that and you change it. And it sucks.
Yep.
Like I'm not saying it doesn't suck, but like
and in this case it was mitigated quickly enough to not be a major issue. That's another really good thing that we can say about this particular situation, right? Like they were able to find it really quickly, stop it from being deployed anywhere, and only limited to a very small attack vector. Even though
yeah,
it could have been a very major one. Like this could have been like huge on the internet, especially if they were to not only try to steal your crypto, but try to steal your session tokens and then use hack your YouTube and all. Like they could have done that, right? Like they could have done a lot of really bad things, try to get in your banks, like so many different things, worm your computers, like literally they're in your file system at that point, right? Like NPM is installed in your computer's file system on NPM. And like they had a plethora of opportunities to really screw you over. And then they could have also screwed over your customers as well, which
yeah. I mean, I think the big thing is that it seems like we have responses. Like we now have a response to a lot of these things. Like even if it is like a new attack, it's like this is like a successful attack, but it's like a semi-successful attack. Like you said, like it wasn't like super, super widespread. It was like dealt with quickly, things like that. And I'm sure there was like lessons learned from this. So like that's another part of security that people don't remember or don't think of, is like the response to an attack is very, very critical, right? It's like, how do I get, how do I, get out of here? How do I fix these problems? How do I, manage this? That's another thing. Like, I mean, even like, if you just consider WordPress, it's like one plugin's acting up. You can rename the folder of that plugin like inactive or whatever it is, and then it just like turns that plugin off. Like that's a pretty, relatively simple way to like, okay, yeah, it's this plugin messing up type thing. Like there's ways that we figure out how to deal with it, and those are important as well. And so like at least it's kind of like, well, it really is a check and a balance. At least the check and balance kind of worked this time, right? Where it was like something slipped, and then the check and balance came in and clamped it. And so like that's that's really crucial and like very important to think as well.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I mean, that personally, I think that's all I personally have to say on the matter. Like attack vectors, like lessen those attack vectors. At least the response system worked, and thankfully it was resolved quickly.
Yeah, exactly. I'm also that's all we have to say on it. I'm not like a super high expert in these attacks, but I will link a couple articles in the show notes of this web news. It'll be in the YouTube description, it'll be on the site description. So definitely go check those out, because it'll have a list of all of the affected packages across both the previous hack, which was a couple weeks ago, and the most recent hack, which I think was a CrowdStrike hack for CrowdStrike NPM packages. Like I could be wrong on that, but there was a bunch there, also pretty high, like high usage, obviously. So check those out. There's more details on how the attack works. There's more details on what the next steps were by the creators of the packages. It's pretty interesting, and one of them has the reference to Shai Hulud as well. So it'll be good to give them some credit.
Friggin' space desert worms.
Yeah. But that's it. Thank you so much for listening to Web News. We'll see you later.
Goodbye.